Good evening all and welcome. As voted for by you, tonight we have a collection of paranormal stories. I hope you enjoy. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to Papa Scare for joining us in tonight's video, who's narrated a few of the stories today, and if you'd like what you hear, you can find more of his stuff in the description and at the end. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When I was younger, I was a smoker. I mean a pretty heavy one. At the time, my grandmother also smoked. It was either a few days before or after Christmas, because I remember the tree was up. My cousin lived down the street a few houses down from me, coincidentally. This was a night when he was sleeping over. We would get to play on the PlayStation, which would be a great night, or so we thought. My grandparents were both sleeping at this point, since it was pretty late. We both smoked, and my grandma smoked Sonoma Regular 100. They were her favorite brand before she quit. Well, my cousin and I had a brilliant idea to go upstairs while she was still asleep to nab ourselves a good old-fashioned cancer stick from her pack. We went up the stairs, being as quiet as mice. When we reached the door, I pushed for it to open. Of course I had to, as it was my house. Wonderful. I pushed the door open, trying to keep quiet. As soon as the door swung open, a black figure jumped at us. It was like a real-life horror movie jump scare. We loved them in the films, but this, no. It made us both nearly crap ourselves. We bolted back down the stairs, ignoring the idea to stay quiet at this point, and once we were in another room, away from the stairs altogether, we were both pale. We both saw it. It wasn't one of those times where one of us would see something. Whatever it was, it showed itself to both of us. That'll teach us to keep smoking and try and take a cigarette again. We dubbed what we saw that night the Christmas Demon.
When I was younger, around 12, my dad moved into a house. Now, this house always gave me weird vibes. It constantly felt like I was being watched. I couldn't sleep with my door open, or without the TV on. Now, this is going to be two separate stories, put into one. The first experience I had was around 2 a.m. I was in the living room watching TV. It was the weekend, so I was staying up, not having a bedtime. Now, the layout of my house was slightly weird, and the living room was dead center of the house, surrounded by dark hallways and rooms. I started hearing noises in the kitchen, but thought nothing of it because we had dogs. A couple of minutes go by, and I can faintly hear my parents in their bedroom doing stuff. They were being loud, so I went to turn to look in the direction of their room. I was sitting with my back to the hallway, and as I'm turning, clear as day, I hear a child's voice in my ear say, "Don't turn around." I froze in place, absolutely paralyzed with fear. Then, I felt a tug on my hair. I promptly jumped up and turned on every light in my house as fast as I could. I didn't hear anything for the rest of the night, but needless to say, I didn't go to sleep until the sun was up. Fast forward to a couple of months later. It's Christmas Eve. Me and my sibling were sent to bed to prepare for Santa to drop the parents off. It was around midnight and I was laying in bed watching TV. I was too excited about presents to sleep. I saw something out of the corner of my eye and looked over at my closed door. As I looked over, I saw a bright blue mist figure float through my door. It was glowing, but not enough to light up my room. I watched as it floated from my door and then through my closed closet door. I was once again absolutely shocked. I covered up my head with a blanket for a couple of minutes until I felt better. I then laid on my side, facing the other side of my bed. The blanket took the shape of someone lying next to me. I laid there and watched as the blanket moved as if someone was breathing. This went on for a couple of minutes, and then suddenly, the blanket laid flat on the bed again. This all happened 12 years ago, and at the time I told myself I was just imagining things. However, the older I get, the more I'm convinced something was up with that house. When I talked to my dad about it, he told me some stories they had about hearing a little boy when no one was there. I've done research on the house and never found anything. However, as we moved out, we found handprints made in the concrete on the driveway. 2 sets of child's handprints with 1978 written underneath. Edit to add, I had 3 little siblings living with me at that house. However, during the first incident, they were all at their mum's, and during the second, they were sleeping across the house.
My house was originally a tiny 2-bedroom bungalow, and my neighborhood started as a vacation and retirement community. It still is a retirement community. Our joking slogan is newlywed or newly dead, since people often move here to raise their young families. In fact, raising a family is exactly why my parents bought a home here. They came to visit my mum's college friend and fell in love with the cozy, flourishing yet quiet neighborhood. As it so happened, our house was for sale at the time and they started looking at it, and it was within their price range. Before they even had their first daughter, me, my mum saw the other neighborhood kids loved the big old chestnut tree in front of the neighbor's boulevard. So when the person living there wanted to cut the tree down, she tipped off City Hall, who told the neighbor they could not cut down the tree as it was on city land. I know this might seem like a lot of detail, but I think it's important to set the scene. Until we renovated, everything was perfectly normal. Not a hint of anything paranormal whatsoever. And then, when we did the first round of renovation, still nothing. In fact, there's really only one specific instance, right after the second round. We added a second level that consisted of a sitting room, 2 bedrooms for my sister and I, and a washroom. Now this part is important. The top of the stairs and the washroom door line up nearly perfectly, so you can see really clearly from the other point. The washroom had a big bathtub that had a removable shower head. My sister was using the shower head to wash her hair, and so was leaning over the tub. As she was rinsing, she looked between her side and arm, out the door. On the landing of the stairs, she saw what appeared to be a person in a trench coat. Startled and panicked, she stood up and then spun around to see nothing. The landing was empty. Being young, she ran to our mum's room, and years later, when we asked her about it, she'd completely forgotten. Years later, I was working at a pet food store for a fundraiser, and we bought in a medium whose strength was animal communication. I figured I'd have my dog read, even if it was just for fun. Besides, it went to a good cause. My dog is a pretty anxious dog overall, but she'd been doing one thing in particular that kind of weirded us out. She'd stare up at the landing on the stairs, cower and back away like she was afraid of something, so I asked the medium about that. She told me my dog was seeing someone on the stairs, something that appeared to be wearing a long garment like a cloak or trench coat. Honestly though, I thought it's probably just a previous owner or occupant in the house coming to see why it's changed so much. I don't think they mean any harm, my dog is just an anxious mess, but she's my anxious mess. So I burned some dragon's blood incense and politely explained to whoever was there this is our house now, although they were free to stick around if they wanted, just so long as they didn't scare my dog anymore. I think it worked because my new dog now loves to sleep on the landing at night.
I experienced some strange and freaky things living in an old house when I was 16. My parents bought it years ago and sold it within 6 years of living there. I'd get home from school and was in the computer room downstairs, and there was a few times where I would randomly hear someone call my name in my mother's voice. When I used to get up to look around the house and respond with, "What?" I was completely alone in the house. My sister used to hear my dad call her name from the first floor of the house, while she was in the second floor, in her room. When she went downstairs, she was completely alone in the house. That day, she just took off in her car and left the house because it freaked her out so much. Another night, I fell asleep in my parents' room, so my parents went to sleep in my room. Around 3 a.m., they heard 3 hard knocks at my bedroom door. My dad responded with, "Come in," but no one did. So he got up and looked around to find us all asleep. When we first moved into the house, my dad found a collection of bowling balls in the garage that he immediately threw out after moving to clear out the space. Months later, my brother and grandmother used to hear bowling balls falling down the attic stairs, and there were no bowling balls in the attic. And this is when my father shared with them. He found those bowling balls in the garage when we first moved in. The creepiest situation that happened to us was a night when my parents saw me walk into their room in the middle of the night. I was wearing a vintage, laced, black turtleneck dress, and I stood at the end of their bed. My mum asked what I was doing up. I supposedly stared into her eyes and stood there in silence. She asked me to go to sleep and dozed off. When she opened her eyes again, I was missing. She then asked my dad if he ever saw me leave the room. He said no. So he then got up to check on me, and I was asleep in my room wearing a red pajama t-shirt. During this time, I went through a serious state of bulimia, depression, and isolated myself often, as I felt too self-conscious and insecure to go out and show myself. After selling the house, the new owner also experienced paranormal experiences, like getting her legs pulled down the basement staircase one night. We eventually did research and found out an older woman had passed in the house previously to us moving, but we don't know what kind of spiritual activity happened while she was alive with her family. The experiences we had are connected to demonic activity. Demons are the only ones capable of imitating human voices or taking on human forms. I always wonder if something sinister has attached itself to me since living in that house, as life has gone into a very dark, endless spiral of bad circumstances and bad luck for me ever since.
When I was 11 years old, I was riding my bicycle to the local shop to meet friends, buy sweets and hang out. It was after school but a summer vacation, bright blue cloudless sky. I hear a faint voice crying, "Help," over and over. I thought someone was stuck up a tree or on a nearby roof and stopped riding to look around. I couldn't see anyone in the nearest tree or the nearest roof, but the voice kept faintly and urgently calling. I remember this next part with utmost clarity. Drifting into view over the nearest rooftop to my right was what can only be described as a silver man floating in the sky, with a silver suit, silver face, silver hair. He was quite high up, at least 3 stories or so, and he floated over the house, over a tree and over my head, all the while calling for help. I watched transfixed and motionless as he floated over me, over the road and over the houses to my left and out of view. What was also strange was my reaction. After the silver man disappeared, I just carried on with my evening plans. I didn't mention the silver man to my friends and talked about it rarely, only years later. I know I wasn't dreaming and that it wasn't a balloon. Aside from that, I have no clue what the hell that silver dude was, but it was super creepy.
Some backstory. I live in a small town in Canada, and my house was built in 2007. Before that, it was farmland. My great-grandmother and her kids immigrated here from Ecuador in the 70s. Throughout my family's bloodline, every woman in the house is believed to have some sort of sixth sense. My great-grandmother's sister was a powerful medium. My grandmother's older sister is also a medium and reads palms. My mother does tarot readings and informs me on her past experiences with ghosts when she lived in Toronto with my grandmother and great-grandmother. Ever since I was a baby, I've been seeing ghosts everywhere. My grandma told me that I would point to the corner and talk to it like somebody was there. I'm 16 now and have been living in this house for the past 15 years. Paranormal experiences have been happening to me for as long as I can remember, so it's just a normal thing now. My mum doesn't encourage me thinking about these things though. She tells me that it's all in my head. A month ago, my dad's parents came up from Texas to renovate our basement. On their last day, my grandpa told me that he thinks that our basement is haunted because of the voices he hears near the cold room. I told my mum about this and she lowered her voice to tell me that she lied to me. She said that it wasn't all in my head and that I've been seeing ghosts. She used to keep me in her room as a child and pray to God to keep the spirits away from me because she saw them too. So far, I've noticed one ghost or entity or something that keeps reappearing in different places. I first saw her when I was 8 or 9. Me and my cousin saw her in my closet. She had pale skin, long blue-black hair, and wore a deep blue dress. The most notable feature is that her nails are painted a shiny metallic blue that glistened in the dark. She held her hand out to us, and we ran away. The second time was when I was 11. At the time, I had a loft bed that was up near my ceiling. My bedroom was on the second floor. I was lying on my bed after coming home from school and saw that lady slowly walk by my window. Her nails were still painted that shiny blue. That was the most notable ghost I've seen. Apart from that, me and my younger brother, 13, both saw a glass cup on our table slowly slide over to the other side of it. I always see figures in my room and hear music in the shower drain. My entire family hears people talking in our bedrooms. Me and my brother have started to wake up with long scratches all over us. The house was blessed by a priest when it was made, but I don't think it worked. I'm getting scared, and I don't know what to do.
When I was a child, I awoke to see the outline of a figure standing with their back to my bed. I thought it was my mother putting clothes away in my brother's dresser. I looked over to my brother, who was sound asleep. I called out to who I thought was my mum. As I peeked over the blanket, the figure looked over their shoulder when I spoke. They turned towards the door and walked out of the room. I sat up quickly because there was sound, and I realized that the door was closed. It had never been opened. The figure walked through the closed door. They say I was dreaming, but I know that I was awake the entire time. My father confirmed years later that he believed in the ghost of my grandfather and how he haunted our house. It's not in a bad way. My nana sold the house to my mother and father when they got married. My father told me that he had been working in his woodshop in the basement, running a chore shop, when he heard someone call out his name. He removed his eye and ear protector and saw no one there. He returned to work and it happened again a second time. He thought it may have been a neighbor yelling outside. He listened for a moment and then returned to his work. When he started up the saw for the third time, he said he felt a hand touch his shoulder and heard his name clear as day. He said when he swings around, the bulb in the pull chain at the swing of the base of the stairs went out and was swinging like it had been pulled. He proceeded to check the entire house, gripping a ball-peen hammer. No one was home. No neighbors were outside either. And he was completely alone.
Okay, so the first known time this thing happened was about 2-3 years ago when I was coming home from a detention I had after school that was an hour long. It was about 4:15 in the afternoon. As I'm literally stepping foot through the door, my brother and his friend walk into the kitchen. His friend looks at me and says, "How did you get downstairs so fast?" I was confused and just said I just got home. He started acting all weird with me, being like, "Stop messing about. You were just upstairs in your bed." I kept telling him I just got home, but he was dead set on the fact that I was asleep upstairs. My brother then went back upstairs and I just assumed he had forgotten something. At this point, my brother hadn't said a word to me. When we talked about it later on, he said the reason he went back upstairs is because he saw me too, in bed, and was checking to see if anyone was in my room. Since then, multiple people have seen me or something that looks like me around the house. It started off as it just being me, but recently my friend has seen my brother a few times. Once I actually heard her say hi to him in the kitchen and thought she was saying hi to me. So I went into the kitchen and she said, "What the hell? Where did Riley go? He was just stood there at the sink." I was laughing because I was sat in the living room, so my brother would have had to walk past me to get in and out of the kitchen. So again, I thought she was joking at first. Then I remembered I had never even told her about the past experiences like this. I honestly have no idea what's going on. All I know is something keeps presenting itself as me and my brother to people, and it's getting pretty creepy. Does anyone have any ideas on what this might be? There have been so many little experiences that have happened in my house, and nearly everyone has seen something. Not a single one of my friends have stayed over and not experienced something. A couple of more examples. Me and one of my best friends were sat downstairs. At like 1 or 2 a.m, she had fallen asleep, and I was still watching TV when the door to the kitchen started rattling. Just a little at first. I blew it off because it does that sometimes due to the slight draft from my front door. But then, the handle started shaking aggressively, like it was being messed with. I woke my friend up and told her we were sleeping in my room instead. We fell asleep with my door closed and locked, which I don't normally do, but my friend couldn't sleep unless it was dark. At about 2:30 a.m, my friend wakes me up and tells me my door just opened. I looked at my bedroom door and it was wide open, but it was locked from the inside and there's no way to open it from the outside. It also couldn't have been her because I have a single bed, so we were pretty cramped in next to each other. I would have felt her get out of bed to open the door. Another small thing that happens very often. My great-grandma passed away a couple of years ago, and because my bedroom is extremely small, my nanan, her daughter, gave me my great-grandma's wardrobe, as it's very small and could easily fit. I also have my grandma's engagement ring, which she gave to me when she was alive. When I tell you I hear knocking from this wardrobe every day and every night, I kind of make a joke out of it. And we'll be like, okay, come on. Nah, Laura, stop it. And it will stop every time I tell it to. There's also a specific corner in my living room. It has a big leather spinning chair in it, and has always given me the strangest feeling, like very uneasy. One night, me and my brother and 2 friends were sat watching TV, and no one was sitting in that corner, when all of a sudden, one of my friends looked over and screams, then starts covering her eyes. I started covering my ears and freaking out a bit because I was startled. When we asked her why she screamed, she said that she saw a tall, dark figure of a man stood in the corner behind the chair. There's loads more that have happened in my house, and none of it seriously creeps me out, apart from whatever that thing is that keeps appearing as me or my sibling. Something about that makes me feel very uneasy.
Let me take you back to a rainy night in March of 2022. I work as the Dean of Criminology and Security Supervisor in one old college in Baguio City, Philippines. While waiting, I decided to scan our classroom on the ground floor of the gymnasium to let time pass as I waited for the rain to stop so that I could leave and go home. It was around 10 p.m. and all employees had gone. All that remained was I and 2 security guards posted in the main gate, the other at the guard post near the college's ground. I went to one of our rooms designated as a crime laboratory, serving as a classroom and a literal laboratory for forensic activities, and decided to do a little cleaning and equipment inspection as our criminology students rarely clean their space when they leave the room. As I was cleaning, I heard a loud bang, as if there was an explosion or gunshot in the rear section of the room where the cubicles for forensics were located. Following the loud bang was a weird yet familiar smell. I felt my heart rate spike up. The smell was burned human flesh. I'm sure of it, since I served in morgues when I was a criminology intern in 2015, tending to various people post-mortem. I was certain of my assessment. It was at that moment with haste that I switched off the lights, locked the doors of the crime laboratory, and briskly walked to my office. I told myself, the hell with this, I'm not going to check out what it is. I remember the stories shared with me by tenured employees. They go as follows. As the building was being constructed, where the college is now built, construction workers would often come across bayonets, helmet, ammunition, landmines, and even human remains. You see, our college stood on land garrisoned by Japanese soldiers in World War II, just like most of the sites and structures in our city. Who knows what atrocities could have been committed on this land, and how many lives were lost as a result, and how many restless souls still wander the area. It's best not to find out.
When I was pregnant, me and my kid's father stayed at his cousin's house for about a month before we moved into our apartment. It's an old farmhouse in a newly developed area of Warwick, Rhode Island. There are farms and woods in one direction and a small town in the other. We were told when we moved in that the house had been built in the mid-1800s, which to me was super interesting until my kid's father, I'll call him Brian, remarked at how the stairs seemed awfully dark and creepy in the middle of the day. And when I looked, he was right. It gave off such a sinister vibe. We slept in the living room, and at night could see through the kitchen, and it was as if the stairs became a dark, uncomfortable void. When we brought this up to Brian's cousin and his wife, they proceeded to laugh and tell us stories of people being pushed down the stairs. I don't think they believed in ghosts, and the husband was an abusive drunk and drug addict, so they had enough problems clearly. That house was chaotic. The husband and wife clearly were having serious issues, emotionally and financially. They had a 6-year-old son who was afraid to sleep upstairs by himself because the shadows scared him. Great. After being in the house alone a couple of times and seeing genuine human figures out of the corner of my eye, or even better, black dots on the floor with what looked like long spindly legs running out, but when you'd look at them straight on, would disappear. A few times I would see a figure out of the corner of my eye, look and see one of the family members who I hadn't heard come in. I think that freaked me out the most, because how can you explain to yourself seeing a person and sometimes nothing being there? Other times, you expect it to disappear, but it would in fact be a person standing there this time. So weird. Brian would say how sitting in one chair in the living room, you'd want to look over your shoulder into the doorway, as if someone was coming down a set of stairs that used to be there. This also freaked me out, considering I slept right near the doorway and often would get a feeling of someone coming toward me. One day, me and Brian were the only two in the entire house, facing one another about 2 feet away, face to face, talking loud as we usually do. Directly in the middle of us, we heard a woman's voice say, "Shh." I asked if he had said that, and he stared at me with huge eyes and asked, "No, did you?" Then we laughed it off, as we were clearly talking too loud for the inhabitants, apparently. We eventually brought this up to the family, who included a second cousin living upstairs, and they confirmed that they too saw and felt things. They told us they assumed the black voids that ran on the floor were just one of their dogs and ignored it if it wasn't. The cousin who lived upstairs said that the curtains to his closet often moved, like they were being pushed, but he chalked it up to being stoned or tired. There was no breeze. The wife told me when they first moved there, her son would see a man in a hat, but assumed it was his imagination. How could you live in a house so clearly haunted and just pass it off? The front of the house at night was avoided by basically everyone, as it was right where it felt like someone was walking by the doorframe at you in the living room. One night, I didn't feel like walking all the way around this huge house to the car, so I walked as fast as I could to the car through the front door. I heard a deep growling coming from the side of the house. They owned 3 dogs, one of which was a bull mastiff. Too freaked out to call for her, I ran in and, to my horror, all 3 dogs were in the house. Needless to say, I didn't use that entrance again. It was such an emotionally depressing house, and maybe me being pregnant, I was just more aware of everything. There were other weird things, but one of the last conversations I had, with one of the roommates renting a back room. It was down a long hallway at the very end, the only door in this isolated hallway. I told her about me and Brian hearing shh directly in the middle of us. She explained she hears the exact same thing in the hallway if she and her son were getting loud, but was sure it was the owner's young son sneaking into the hallway. But I'm not so sure.
Where I come from, the paranormal entity we're aware of is called a jinn. They are believed to be a bit like humans, but invisible and made of smoke. My grandma swears one day when she was out in the field at night, she saw a jinn. They started throwing stones at her and spooked her horse, and she heard barefoot noises chasing after her with no one behind her for at least a mile. I personally didn't believe any of it, but she still gets scared while recounting the story. I myself have had a few strange things happen to me as well, but they're probably just mere coincidences. I'll let you be the judge though. The first thing happened when I was a child, staying in my aforementioned grandmother's house for the summer. It's in a village, no life or sounds around after 10 p.m, and I was sleeping with my father in the bed, when suddenly I awoke. I swear to God I saw a dark figure praying on top of us. Praying like Muslims do 5 times a day, you know. I looked at it for about 3 seconds or so, and it was just a very dark shadow. I immediately closed my eyes. I didn't want to be a coward who wakes up his dad for probably nothing. I hear no sounds, nothing that makes any sound at all. And I didn't feel strange or feel like something was wrong. Just scared the living crap out of me. After calming myself down, I went to sleep again. There was an old fan spinning in the room because it was so hot. In the morning, I thought it was probably the shadow of it due to the very bright moonlight coming from the window. But God, what a scare it was. The second time, I'm in my grandmother's house again. They told me to grab something from upstairs. It's daytime, and as I'm slowly climbing the stairs, suddenly someone sprints past me and heads for the upstairs, scaring me crapless while doing so. I look to see that it's my aunt and don't say a word. She probably has some business to do right away. She reaches upstairs way before me and vanishes from my line of sight. I get there too, grab what they need from me, and head back down. Now, this only took about 5 seconds, and I was just near the stairs. I head down to see my aunt sitting down, having coffee with my mum. It was impossible. I don't know if I imagined the whole someone running past me, but I swear that I saw my aunt go upstairs and I didn't hear her come back down because I was right on the staircase. I still don't know what that was. It's probably worth mentioning that my aunt was having very intense sleep paralysis, and everybody was telling her it was a jinn messing with her. They said someone put a spell on her for the jinn to target her. The woman she spoke to told her there is a water well near our grandma's house and that the jinn lives there. She wrote her something in Arabic and never had night paralysis or anything spooky happen to her again. In that same house, my father and I were watching a found footage exorcism movie, and in one of the most intense scenes, the door to our right slowly opened, making that typical horror movie ghost door opening sound. My father looks at me, and I look at him. We both look at the dark room, staring at us, and he says, "What the hell?" We close the door and continue the movie, and it didn't happen again. Must have been the wind, right? In my own house, I'm watching a YouTube video late at night, and I hear 3 knocks on the house's front door. I heard them slow and strong 3 times. So, around here we have superstitions for everything, and my mind goes, oh my God, it is 3 times. They say the dead knock 3 times at the door when they come for a visit, and it was 3 a.m. I was crapping myself, shaking, and I yell for my mum. She doesn't hear me, but my father wakes up and I told him what I heard. He goes down to the front door to check it. It's probably just the pipe, son. There was nothing after all. The jinn stuff is scary, especially when you grow up hearing so much gossip about them all the time. I personally don't believe in them, but still, Some things that I experienced, I just can't find a logical solution that I'm satisfied with.
I used to live in a haunted guest house for about a year. So many crazy things would happen that I have absolutely no explanation for. It's a bit long, but here is a list of things I remember would happen. Weird noises and voices. I'm hearing impaired, so I wear hearing aids, and I know that spirits tend to communicate through electronic devices. I would hear voices and laughter quite frequently. I had a roommate, and I swore to him that I kept hearing these things. One time, I heard laughing again and asked him, "Do you hear that?" And he said no. I told him, "They're laughing right now. It's loud. You can't hear that." He couldn't hear anything. My items would be moved around. I remember this one time I found my vase with flowers in my laundry hamper. I was like, WTF. I'd only gone to work that day and my roomie hadn't been in the house that week. I texted him, asking if he put my vase in the hamper, and he said no. As far as I know, nobody had access to the house, including the property owner. My roomie told me that he had his ex come over one time, before me, and she claimed she saw an older man with a beard behind him when he was talking to her. It was only a split second and he disappeared. He wasn't able to see him, but his ex did. I probably saw the same older man with a beard. I was headed to bed and I saw an apparition of an older man with a beard. I ran out of my room so freaked out and told him to sleep with me. I was very afraid of sleeping alone. We slept in the same room for a few months. I would constantly get sleep paralysis every single night at that place. I wasn't stressed out or anything, even though the place was haunted. But every night I had sleep paralysis. I wouldn't get sleep paralysis anywhere else, just that place. My roomie found a tube of lipstick rolling on the floor. He asked me if that tube of lipstick was mine. It wasn't. I asked him maybe it was one of his girlfriends. He said it wasn't theirs. It just appeared out of nowhere. He would have random objects appear to him, not belonging to anyone we knew. These spirits were tidy. There have been several instances where I'd leave my bedroom with my shoes thrown around and my bed unmade. I'd come home to my shoes being nicely put away with my bed made. Roomie says he never tidied up my personal space. After all these instances, I decided to install a security camera, with my roomie's permission, of course. I would see him come into my room. I had the only bathroom. Weird layout, I know. But he would never touch my stuff. The camera also came with night vision when movement was detected. Once again, I leave my place untidy. Roomie was never in my room. Nighttime falls, and the next morning my shoes and bed are made. Camera didn't pick up anything. Nothing would ever happen during the daytime, just at nighttime with my stuff being moved. Finally, I caught movement. I was spending my usual weekend with my boyfriend, now husband, and something triggered the night vision on my camera. It looked like someone walked right in front, and then you can see an outline of a little girl and a shadow, possibly a man, walking. The video only lasted 5 seconds, and they were gone. No, it's not light from the window. The guest house was too far from getting lights from the street, and the curtains were blackout curtains. Not a bug either. I don't know how bugs can look like what was on the video. I remember sending my video to a medium, and he said it's definitely spirits caught on camera. He told me, before I could even mention it, that there's a young girl and an older man haunting the place. The only history about the house was that the property used to be abandoned. Homeless people would stay here, and teens would use Ouija boards there. That's a possibility for the haunting.
I'm a Catholic, and for a period of time in my mid-20s, I visited some monasteries as I was open to the possibility of being a monk or friar. During this time, I spent around a week in a Benedictine monastery in the western United States. One night during my stay, I joined the monks for Compline. Compline is the prayers that they say right before going to bed. It's sometimes just called night prayers, and is one part of it where you ask for God to protect you during the night. We all know that the night is when we're probably most vulnerable, so it's fitting to do so. So after the nightly routine, I went down to the monastery basement because I needed to either iron some clothes or do last-minute laundry. I can't remember which. When I got down there, the laundry room light was off, as well as the light to the hallway that led to it. I walked straight into the laundry room, and when I did, I slipped on the floor and almost fell but caught myself. When I inspected the room with the lights on, I could see there was water all over the floor and the hallway to the laundry room was flooded a bit. The floor in the laundry room was very hard, so if you slipped and hit your head, you'd probably have a bad injury or worse. I'm alone in there, trying to dry up the floor as best I can with what I could find. I remember just being in there thinking I wish one of the monks would come down here so that I could let them know and we could at least put some warning signs up so no one slips. Shortly after that, one of the elder monks came down the hallway and he looked confused, like he was looking for someone that wasn't there. I took advantage of him being there and told him that there had been a flooding issue down here and it needed attention. This is where it became strange. He told me he had just gotten a crackly phone call to the landline in his room that someone, claiming to be their maintenance guy, told him there was a leak and he needed to come down to check it out. He asked me if I'd seen anyone in the area of the basement before I got there, and I told him no. The lights were off and no one was there. The source of the water ended up clogging up a water drain outside the basement, and it was raining that night, so the water was flooding in. Anyway, the monk called the maintenance guy right while we were speaking there and asked if he'd just called him about the leak. The maintenance guy said no. At this point, the monk and I were both kind of baffled. I mean, who the heck called him if it wasn't the maintenance guy? Especially since the man who called him said he was the maintenance guy and with the same name. At this point, I had a moment where I felt a little eerie but also comforted. After all, we had just prayed for protection during the night. I don't know who exactly spoke to the monk to warn him, but I had a feeling it was an angel, to make sure no one would be hurt. This experience left me with a sense that we're truly not alone in the universe, even if we might feel that way sometimes.
From the end of 1995 until the middle of 2012, I lived in a house I think may have been haunted. We had a lot of the stereotypical kinds of events that could sometimes be explained away. So maybe I'm way off base here. Here are some examples. 1. Knocking on the walls of our bedroom late at night, which was about 12 feet off the ground. I also heard knocking at the front door. In the early morning, no one there. And on my bedroom door, again, no one there. 2. We had a sudden influx of very big black flies. We couldn't find where they had gotten in. There was no spoiled food in the house to attract them, and we had no other bug problems. They lasted about a month, then they were gone. They never came back again. 3. We were typically up late at night, like going to bed between 2 to 4 a.m. was normal for us. In the mornings, I would often feel and hear my husband come into the bedroom to kiss me goodbye before going to work. As I waited for his kiss, it would never come. I opened my eyes and look up, and no one was there. 4. I was frequently awakened by someone kicking my bed forcefully. Finally, I said one day, "Look, I'm up late at night, so I sleep late in the day, and sometimes I have insomnia. Leave me alone, okay?" After that, the bed kicking stopped. 5. I saw my husband one evening trying to close a sliding glass door that we rarely used. There was a metal rod in one corner that had to be removed before the door would open. But my husband was trying to open it from outside. I called to him, "Wait a minute, I'll get it." But when I got to the door, he wasn't there. When I asked him about it, he said it wasn't him. Then I remembered the man was wearing a long-sleeved white shirt. My husband didn't have such a shirt. There are other small things that happened, like sudden bad smells, scratching in the walls, and another apparition I saw when coming out of the shower. He looked like the man at the door, except he had a huge mouth with shark-like teeth. I heard from the neighbors that someone committed suicide in their house, but I never heard any details. I have limited knowledge of any other things about the property. I began getting sicker than before I moved there, and by the time I left, I had about 6 chronic illnesses. I feel much better after leaving there, but I feel like some of the bad stuff continues where I live now, as if something followed me here. I'm sorry this is so long. Thanks if you're still listening at this point. I would like to have someone else's take on all this. Am I crazy to think this house could have been haunted?
These are some stories that my grandfather used to tell us when we were kids, about things that happened to him when he was young. Even though I don't know my grandfather is a liar, I was genuinely convinced that all of this really happened. The first is the Nawal. The first story that I remember is that one night when he was at his house, he heard someone knock on the front door. When he came down to see who was calling, he saw by the side of the door that it was a strange creature. Frightened, he went for his Bowie knife, opened the door, and stabbed it in the back, driving it away. The next morning, when he went to the store, the owner told him, "What a blow you gave me." When my grandfather saw the man's back, he had the mark of the Bowie knife. In Mexican folklore, a Nawal is a person that has the ability to transform into an animal. For some time, my grandfather used to work paving roads. One day, while digging in the dirt, his companions quickly began to grab dirt and put it in their pockets. My grandfather, confused, asked them why they were picking it up in such desperation. They shouted at him, "Look, you moron, grab the coins!" And when they finished, they fled. According to my grandfather, it was not his luck to see the coins. It was an old belief that treasures could only be seen by the people for whom they were intended. So if something wasn't meant for you, you weren't allowed to see it. So later, while walking in the streets, my grandfather found a pot full of coal. He took it to his house and left it there for a few days, but because it smelt so bad, he went to a river near the house and threw it in there. After that, one of his relatives visited him. When he learned what happened with the pot, he told him, "Why did you throw it away? The pot had gold inside. What you should have done is put it by your door. If it's meant for someone in your family, you could have given the gold to them, and they would have spent it on something for you." My grandfather quickly returned to the river to look for the pot, but of course it was no longer there. My grandfather told us that one day a priest visited his home, and he forgot a book there. One of his cousins read it and told my great-grandfather that it was prophecies for the future. Here it says that future people will travel under the earth, so like the subway. That all the water you see here is going to disappear. Back in the day, Mexico City was full of water, and nowadays we struggle for it. That at the end of times, the mule is going to give birth, etc. I don't remember what happened to the book, but I think the priest did come back for it. Later, when my grandfather was a child, he was in his home when he saw how a tied-up dead man fell from the roof directly to the ground. Scared, he told my great-grandmother, and when they went to the location, there was no body there to be found. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for being here and listening. I hope my voice is almost recovered. Still a bit blocked, but there you go. Just thank you. Thank you for being here so much. It really does mean the world to me that you guys watch the videos and stick around to the end. Thank you. Really, I don't have any more words than that. You guys are the best. I'd like to extend an extra thank you to Papa Scare for joining me in tonight's video. It's always great to have him on. I love his voice. If you'd like to hear more from him, you can check out his channel by following the link in the description, or on screen shortly, actually. So feel free to do that if you'd like. I'd also like to extend an extra thank you to my big supporters this month on Patreon and YouTube memberships. All the names can be seen on screen. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your continued support and help in helping keep this channel a reality. You guys make my world, so thank you. But until the next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.